Hey everyone, I wanted to go over the new and exciting news that we got for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, which is now available on the Nintendo Switch and on PC. And in this video, I want to specifically focus on talking about all the monsters that we can expect to be available in free title update number 2, as a lot of information has begun to trickle out as people begin to look into the game's files. But as I've mentioned before, do keep in mind that this information is incomplete, usually, as is the nature of not being able to see everything until the final patch is released, essentially confirming that all the information that we have been able to see in the files already has been accurate all along. I also want to make a quick clarification regarding the last video that I made when I spoke about the afflicted 6 and 7 star monsters. A lot of people were asking me regarding Rajang, just normal Rajang, and normal Bazelgeuse not being listed for either 6-star afflicted investigation quest and or 7-star afflicted investigation quest. And the reason why I didn't mention either of those two is because they're not mentioned in the game files anywhere as of right now. Once again, I have to reiterate, this is not final. Therefore, we cannot necessarily just drop them in because we feel like it or because it makes sense. Simply put, I didn't mention them because they were not mentioned in the game files as of being 6-star afflicted monsters. If that is to change, certainly we'll be talking about it, but as of right now, that is not the case for now. Now, regarding the actual free title update number 2 monsters that we can expect, the website has been, interestingly enough, updated, and they do mention that several rare species are coming. This is something that is kind of touched upon in the roadmap that they upgraded recently, but now it says several rare species. Now, I also want to clarify regarding the whole rare species and such species for free title update number 2. As of right now, it seems like the only such species that we are getting is Flaming Espinas. I want to talk about him a little bit more, since we have some things that I do want to go over, but more importantly, it seems like this is going to be a rare monster focused free title update for plenty of reasons. So when it comes to actually Flaming Espinas, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I do want to go over some things. And that is some of the questions that I've received as to why it didn't necessarily have a direct Japanese translation before it was actually considered brown Espinas or orange Espinas in other regions. And essentially the reason is that in Japan, they don't give such species a direct name. So for example, Azure Rathalos, which we actually know as blue Rathalos instead of just red Rathalos, that is actually a Rathalos subspecies, but in Japan, they just kind of call it Rathalos subspecies. They don't call it Azure, they don't call it blue, they don't call it annoying Rathalos, they just call it subspecies Rathalos. So because they do things a little bit differently there naming wise, it's just kind of become the norm. So I guess we should just be thankful that after 14 years, brown Espinas that we have been actually calling, but it's just normal Espinas subspecies, finally got an original name. Do remember that this one was introduced back in 2008 for Frontiers 2.5 update. Now, by the time that you're watching this, I probably have already put out my White Espinas video where I discussed all the differences and why I think that monster would have probably been a little bit of a better addition to the roster instead of just Flaming Espinas. But there are a couple of differences and why I think they decided to go with Flaming Espinas at the end of the day. It is weak to water, it is fire elementally based, it does have fire, blight, paralyzing, and poison on top of defense down. I guess the only real discussion point regarding its actual afflictions is that we don't necessarily know if defense down is only being given to the hunter if it uses its charged up flaming fireball, or if it's just gonna be just a normal attack that gives you both fire, blight, paralyzed, poison, and defense down stacked up on top of that. And then we can obviously expect that in future free title updates, this one is also gonna get an afflicted version as well, so you're gonna be able to get those extra debuffs as well added in. Now, there is a little bit of an interesting translation coming out of a Japanese person who has been looking into the game files, mentioning that this one could also have an attack that gives you movement down debuff. Now, we don't necessarily know what that actually means or what that attack could actually be. We certainly haven't seen all the attacks yet, so we're just gonna have to wait and see if that actually turns out to be true. What we do know, however, is that it's gonna have reworked moves as well. So a lot of the attacks that brown Espinas had back in Frontiers, those moves have been completely reworked, since a lot of just that framework of that game no longer necessarily works with modern games, as the game has been sped out significantly. Now, when it comes to actual armor skills, I did mention in a couple of videos that we do have some pretty decent ideas regarding the unique armor skills. It is going to have a brand new one for sure. Pretty much all the Sunbreak armors already have a brand new unique skill, on top of the traditional ones that the Frontier version had, which I believe it had Adrenaline, which boosted your defense and your stats under 40% health, but I believe that's been completely reworked as well. Another skill that it used to have was Reckless Abandon, which is now basically Critical Eye, raising your affinity based on the current weapon's affinity by a certain percentage. Originally, it also had Boosted Sleep, so if you were using a sleep weapon, you had a chance to be able to put a monster to sleep a little bit easier. And you also had Poison Resist as well, so Poison Negate, I believe is what we call it now. So that is what it used to have, and that's what it has now. Now, I think the more interesting discussion topic that we can have in this video is, of course, the brand new Mizuzune version of this monster that we're getting for free title update number 2. And essentially, it looks like as people have begun to look to the files, it was discovered that there are some Mitsu weapons with fire elemental attached to it. This belongs to Mitsu type monster weapons. So it is being presumed that this rare species that we're getting from free title update number 2, it is going to be fire based, or at the very least blast based in some regards. So that is a lot of the speculation that we have been seeing going around. All of this came around at the same time that we actually got a glance to see some of the slotting for the Mizu armor as well, and the brown / flaming Aspenas armors as well, as we confirmed in the previous video. This led essentially to a lot of speculation whether it is that we're actually just getting 2 monsters for this update or perhaps more. But as I touched on the top of this video, and the reasoning why I wanted to make it very clear that this is still just in the works and nothing is finished until we actually see the final patch drop and everything becomes a bit more clear. So just because we have just 2 monsters armor sets in the game and there is a specific Mitsu flaming weapon available there, that doesn't necessarily confirm anything. It just gives us a little bit of a suggestion as to what to expect. So in recap, a Fire Mizuzune is going to be really interesting to see, not only because I think they would actually fully rework Apex Mizu into this Flaming Fire Mizu, which is something that we kind of already got to see, as Apex Mizuzune was essentially a Soul Seer Mizu from Generations Ultimate. So this is just going to be Capcom fully doubling down on that same idea. Let's remember that Soul Seer was a deviant and this will be a rare species, so they certainly have the freedom to be able to rework it in whatever way they find possible. But I fully expect to see the big water bubbles that you actually got to see back for big Apex Mizu's attack being set on fire. You already got to see some of that already back in the Apex format. So they're just gonna like rework it, reskin it, make it look a little bit different and call it a day. That seems to be the MO that they are doing specifically for Flaming Espinas, so why wouldn't they necessarily do the same thing for Mizu as well? Now, with all that said, I have still seen plenty of people hoping and wishing for Thunder Bubble Mizuzune, and for good reason. This was one of the more unique monsters in Monster Hunter Explorer, the mobile game, and it quickly became a fan favorite. The issue is that this is kind of like Frontiers. After all these years where they were finally decided to start bringing back monsters from that game into the fold, into the mainline games, Explorer has not had any much luck as well, so they simply have avoided adding any of those special species, or better known as variants, into the fold. So maybe they're just gonna wait into Monster Hunter 6 or whatever the next game ends up being. With that said though, Thunder Bubble Mizuzune was a pretty great monster to fight, one of the more flashier monsters in that specific version of the game, and ultimately it will be missed if they just simply choose to never bring it back, as it's just kind of like his very own unique thing. Now, like I mentioned at the top of the video that the official page mentions multiple rare species appearing, the Japanese version of that very same post is singular. Now, we have had this issue before where in Japanese, a singular version of the post is kind of like mistranslated into multiples here in North America, or at the very least in English. So I won't sit here and confirm that there are more rare species coming. It is expected that we are going to get anything more than 2. Whether it's 3 or 4 is anyone's guess at this point in time, but there have been a lot of monsters being speculated for good reason as well. And the two leading candidates that I want to focus a bit more on are Molten Tigrex and a brand new Seregios as well. Now, Molten Tigrex does qualify as a rare species. It was introduced in Monster Hunter 4. This is an enigmatic blood-colored Tigrex, and this is another monster that was only ever featured in the tower. This is something that we spoke about before, where the tower is where Brown Espinas, aka Flaming Espinas, makes his home, and it was the only other tower monster that was originally revealed at the time. But we now know that Flaming Espinas will be fighting in Forlorn Arena, which is a huge bummer for some people, as they were hoping to see more new arenas, and the tower would have certainly been one of those. This would have made actually two monsters that would made the tower their home, so it was the perfect opportunity for them to decide to bring it back. With that said, however, this was a blast focused monster. Presumably it will continue to be that as well. It would be a good addition since we don't necessarily have many of those as well. It is weak to ice and water, and the attacks are also very interesting since they resemble a lot of Brute Tigrex attack, very much adding plenty of cores and damage to it on top of Blast Blight as well. As a cool effect, when it would actually run, it would leave sparks underground, kind of like showing just how fierce and how angry it actually was, that it would just be making sparks in the ground as it trounced over hunters, and it had a charge attack that will trample on top of a triple zigzag as well. So let's not forget that they also added it in Monster Hunter Stories 2 as a free title update back in September of 2021. So we have seen some love for this monster, albeit on a spin-off series as well. Some of the skills that the armor feature were speed eating, hearing or earplugs as we now know it, attack up, and ferocity skill, which has been kind of replaced as well, kind of like how we talked about Flaming Espinas as well. Now, I think the more interesting monster out of all the additions that we can get, and the reason why I left it for last, is the Seregios, a rare species addition. But I do have my caveats and my reasoning as to why that might be just a lot of wishing from people and not necessarily something true. And the reason for that is this will most likely end up being a feature monster, like Flaming Espinas or like this Flaming Fire Mitsuzune that we are going to be able to get into the future. And Capcom would certainly want to keep eyes on a rare species Seregios. The reason for that is because Seregios right now only has a normal Seregios and the special species / variant Seregios from Explorer. So we don't necessarily have many other Seregios, and they would certainly want to focus or bring a lot of focus into a brand new version of that monster. So unless they're actually willing to drop 3 specific trailers featuring monsters for this brand new update, which I don't necessarily think they're going to do, I don't necessarily think this one is ever going to materialize unless they actually save it for future updates, which we'll just have to see. So I've seen a lot of discussion regarding a brand new Seregios rare species, but I'm a little bit hesitant. It's interesting to think about, but I'm a little bit hesitant since they're basically focusing on just Flaming Espinas, the brand new Fire Mizu, and then whatever extras that they add, like the Molten Tigrex, and maybe something else. A lot of people have suggested Chaotic Gore Magala. That is not happening this feature title update. They're gonna save that for the third one. So that's about all the information that I have for you guys today. I certainly want to hear some feedback. Do let me know in the comments what monsters you're hoping to see the most. Does Flaming Mitsuzune actually interest you? Do you actually want Thunder Bubble Mitsuzune? I know a lot of people do. So let me know in the comments what it is that you're actually hoping for. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.